Sister tries to sell me to her boyfriend, then she thought I should raise her baby. Jessie Cook was a beautiful woman with a sweet and charming disposition. At the age of 30, she was fulfilling both employers' and neighbors' expectations of her by working at a reputable company in Raya. Cook was the kind of person who would drop whatever she was doing to help others in need, and as such, she had a good relationship with everyone around her. Roy lived close to his older sister, Jessie, who had always done her best to protect him from the worst of the world. Unfortunately, her best intentions couldn't shield Roy from the ruthless reality that would soon come knocking at their door. From the tender age of 4, Roy and Jessie had been orphans. Their parents had been severed from their lives in a car crash that ended their lives abruptly, leaving Roy and his sister to grapple with the bitterness of their fate. While the siblings had no choice but to accept the loss of their parents, they clung to each other and cultivated an unbreakable bond. Roy was only 14 years old when he lost his father and mother, and Jessie, who was only 21 years old at the time, was forced to grow up faster and take on the role of a parent. She raised him on her own, juggling the duties of making money with those of a guardian. Despite the stormy aftermath of their parents' deaths, Jessie did her best to insulate Roy from it, and over time, the memory of their parents dimmed. Both of them were deeply involved in their routines, as Roy focused on his academics and Jessie worked persistently to rid their lives of any vestiges of poverty. It was a difficult road for both of them to walk because Roy's education could only take him up to the 9th grade. However, Jessie was unfazed, and with her unwavering determination, she set out to achieve her personal and professional goals. After a few back-and-forth struggles with their lives, Jessie ended up working in her dream company, employed as a front office manager at Raya Corporation. She was now a lavish and stylish woman with shiny hair, a charming demeanor, and a smile that could light up an entire room. From an outsider's perspective, one might even assume she had it all together. Her audacious personality and fashion sense had garnered her a loyal following of friends, while her professional competence in the workplace had earned her the admiration and respect of her coworkers. Meanwhile, Roy had also carved out a decent life for himself. He held an office job and assisted Jessie with the family's financial security. Hailing from an impoverished background, the Cook siblings had become a pair of truly self-reliant individuals who worked diligently to create lives they could be proud of. Little did they know, though, that their hard work would be put to the test in ways they could never have anticipated. In October 2023, Jessie and Roy's comfortable routine was shaken by a surprising and unwelcome intruder into their lives. Jessie had been blindsided by the sudden arrival of her ex-boyfriend, Kelvin. Jessie had been dating Kelvin for a couple of years, but she had ended their relationship on less than amicable terms. She had decided to part ways with Kelvin after she was appalled to find out that he had a wife and 2 kids waiting for him back home. The shock of discovering that the man she had been seeing was already married had been traumatic enough, but it had also sent Jessie into a spiral of rage and despair. She was grateful that she had found out before she had taken things further with him, but the pain and sense of betrayal lingered for weeks. Jessie had been pressured by Kelvin many times after their breakup, but she always blocked his number and refused to see him. After a while, she expected him to get the message and give up, but Kelvin's unexpected visit in October introduced a new level of urgency into the situation. Upon opening the door, Jessie was dismayed to see Kelvin standing on the other side, looking visibly perturbed and agitated. Panicked, she quickly closed the door, but Kelvin called out to her from the other side. When she mustered the courage to speak to him, Kelvin informed her that his wife had finally made the decision to leave him. He confided in her that the marriage had been troubled for months and that he had been separated from his wife for 2 years now, something Kelvin had not revealed to Jessie earlier. Reluctantly, Jessie opened the door for Kelvin and listened as he pleaded his case. He told her that he had been unhappy in his marriage and that he had only felt truly content with her. Now that his wife had left him, he was convinced that they could finally be together without any obstacles in their path. Kelvin bombarded her with requests and demands, pleading with her to forgive him for his earlier deception and offering her anything she wanted. Despite everything, Kelvin's dramatic outburst had an adverse effect on Jessie. Rather than kindling feelings of sympathy for him and his heartbreak, Jessie was incensed by his selfishness and lies. She had to force herself to remain calm and composed as she listened to his speech, all the while resenting him for barging back into her life when she had made it clear that she wanted nothing to do with him. When Kelvin eventually ran out of words, Jessie gritted her teeth and told him that she was not interested in getting back together with him, regardless of his marital status. As far as she was concerned, she had moved on from that part of her life, and she had no intention of revisiting it. Unmoved by his dramatic display, Jessie politely but firmly told Kelvin that she needed him to respect her boundaries and leave her alone. In response, Kelvin knelt in front of her and took out an expensive diamond ring and a heart-shaped locket from his pocket. Jessie was taken aback by this gesture that felt straight out of a cheesy romantic movie. Kelvin was doing everything in his power to win her back, but his grand gestures only made Jessie even angrier. As he professed his undying love for her, she scoffed and told him that he needed to grow up and take responsibility for his mistakes. She chided him for putting her in a difficult position and for trying to buy her with gifts. Kelvin insisted that his feelings were genuine and that she was the only woman he wanted to be with, but Jessie stood her ground and refused to waver. When she at last offered to return the ring and locket to him, Kelvin hesitated and looked away as if he were wrestling with some inner turmoil. In a last-ditch effort to win Jessie over, he tearfully dropped to his knees and took her hand in his own, imploring her to give him another chance. He begged her to consider his proposal of marriage. Jessie was shocked. She had never expected Kelvin to take things this far, and now she was at a loss for words. As her heart pounded in her chest, she tried to process the fact that Kelvin was actually proposing to her right then and there. Meanwhile, Roy had been sitting in the living room the entire time, listening with growing anger to the dramatic encounter taking place just a few feet away. He knew how much Kelvin's deception had hurt his sister, and he was seething with rage by the time the proposal was laid out. Without considering his own safety, Roy charged into the room and ripped Jessie's hand out of Kelvin's grasp. Pushing Kelvin back, he launched into a fiery tirade in which he berated and insulted him. Roy called Kelvin a despicable, selfish man and lambasted him for treating Jessie so poorly. His voice rose with each passing moment, and he didn't hold back as he let loose all his pent-up rage. Barely acknowledging Roy's outburst, Kelvin turned to Jessie and pressed the ring and locket into her hands. He said, "I'm not leaving here without you, Jess. I truly believe we are meant to be together. You're the only beautiful devil in my life, and I can't see myself with someone else who isn't you. I want you, and it's not because I only like what I see and desire. It's because I truly mean it from the bottom of my soul." Despite Kelvin's declaration of love, Jessie couldn't ignore the anger and betrayal that simmered beneath the surface. She felt the weight of her brother's protective rage, the knowledge of Kelvin's previous deception, and her own feelings of vulnerability collide in a confusing mix of emotions. Closing her eyes for a moment to steady herself, she extended her arm and returned the ring and locket to Kelvin. "I'm sorry, Kelvin," she said in a hushed voice. "I can't accept this proposal. It's not right, and I'm sure you know that too. I don't feel right about this, and I don't wish to ever see you again. Our time has come and gone." At her calmly spoken words, the full weight of Kelvin's rejection seemed to finally sink in. He gazed at her with a mixture of disbelief and desperation, but Jessie met his eyes with unwavering determination. "Please leave, Kelvin. I won't be able to forgive you for what you did. We had a beautiful past, and I will not let it be defamed, so don't dare come back to me," Jessie said firmly, smiling to hide the tears that threatened to spill. In a desperate last reply, Kelvin grabbed her hand and fell to his knees again, looking up at Jessie with pleading eyes. "I'm truly devastated by the outcome of the breakup, and I'm extremely sorry for the lies too. I accept my downfall, but I will always be in love with who you are as a woman and a person. Despite anything that goes wrong, it's just you who I bet my money on. I need time to digest the breakup. And I have a baby now." Kelvin paused briefly to take in Jessie's reaction, but she remained impassive. Seeing that his confession hadn't prompted a response, he quickly continued, "I have a daughter due to be born any day now, and I want you to be there for both of us. I truly believe you can be a loving mother to her. Please, Jessie, come with me to the hospital. My wife is having complications, and I can't be of any help to her. But you could be there for my child and provide her with the comfort and love she needs." With a full heart, Jessie allowed the tears to fall from her eyes. She was both distressed and miserable to see Kelvin this way, especially after the soulful proposal he had just made to her. At this point in time, she believed she could almost forgive the man for all of his mistakes and accept his proposal. Kelvin's comment about having a child, on the other hand, captured her interest. It took Jessie a moment to calm herself before she could speak again. "Did you say your wife is in distress? Please, take me to her and I will help. You can feel better about our breakup, but I will always lend a hand to those in need." "Oh, don't misunderstand. She's fine. I need you to give your word that you will act as the mother figure for my child while I play the fatherly role. That's all I ask for. We can have a clean break from each other after this." Some of the earlier embarrassment and humiliation Jessie felt during their conversation abandoned her, leaving her with a sense of unease. With a shallow breath, she questioned Kelvin, "Who is this child you speak of?" Kelvin hesitated for a moment, taking in Jessie's blotchy eyes and wary expression. After a moment of silence, he told her the truth. "The child you have dreamed of is the one who is going to change your life. This is what faith brings for you. The best part about all of it is that you are the mother of the child I speak of." Trapped in a web of emotions and confusion, Jessie staggered backward and leaned against her dining table for support. Now she understood why Kelvin had become weak and visited her despite unfurling their initial interactions. He exhaled deeply as her face took on an expression of dread. "Yes, I am carrying your baby boy. Now be a man and accept your duties. I'm not asking for much, just a little bit of what we had going on for ourselves," Jessie shouted defensively. She felt both scared and vulnerable, and as she gazed at Kelvin's pained expression, she found herself questioning everything she thought she knew. "Don't do this to me, Jessie. Can't you see this is wrong and not true? It's not what it seems," Kelvin pleaded. "Stop wimping," liar, screamed Roy, unable to control his temper any longer. "You have been lying to everyone ever since you walked through that door. Get out of this house and never come back. If I ever see you again, I promise you won't leave in one piece." With those threatening words, he advanced on Kelvin, who quickly stepped back in alarm. "He's right, Kelvin. Get out. I don't want to ever hear from or speak to you again. The baby, everything bothers me. I just don't want you near us. Just leave," Jessie demanded, her voice laced with pain and frustration. After suffering a moment later in pure dread, Kelvin followed as Jessie nudged him outside, with Roy close behind. With a final, pleading look that neither of them acknowledged, Kelvin stepped off the porch and into the street, where he immediately hailed a waiting taxi and drove away. Frustrated and overwhelmed, Jessie stumbled over to the sofa and collapsed onto it, her thoughts racing and her heart aching. Jessie Cook was a beautiful woman with shiny hair, a charming demeanor, and a smile with a personality that told a captivating story. She was also unmarried and hadn't allowed any man into her life despite her charm and attractiveness. She had been the same ever since Roy had known her. So how did she suddenly turn up with a pregnancy attributed to none other than her ex, who had deceived her during their time together? This conundrum kept Roy up all night, but no matter how hard he thought, the answers eluded him. Shocked and disoriented by the rush of emotions, Jessie dropped her face into her hands and allowed herself to cry. The release brought a measure of relief, but it did little to quell the storm of thoughts spinning in her mind. Between the unexpected return of Kelvin, his dramatic proposal, and the shocking revelation that she was pregnant, she felt as though her world had been turned upside down. Throughout her life, Jessie had always believed in the value of honesty and integrity. She had been raised to be a good person and to treat others with respect. As a result, she had worked hard to build a reputation as a trustworthy and reliable individual both in her personal and professional life. Now, however, that reputation was being called into question, and it shook Jessie to the core. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't make sense of what was happening. The more she thought about it, the more perplexed and panicked she became. Roy tried to comfort her, but even his soothing words couldn't dispel the tendrils of doubt that had taken root in her heart. It wasn't just the specter of being a single mother that frightened her, although that was certainly part of it. It was the feeling of being completely out of control of her own life, of having her fate decided by lies and deceit that crushed her spirit most severely. She felt like the ground had been torn out from under her, leaving her to flounder in an abyss of uncertainty. Throughout the night, and even in the days that followed, Jessie found herself in a dazed and disoriented state. Her interactions with Roy and her colleagues felt strained as she struggled to maintain a facade of normalcy. She threw herself into her work as a means of distraction, but even then, she couldn't escape the gnawing sense of unease. Every time she had a moment to herself, frightening thoughts would begin to creep in. Did she have broken enough to have stayed away from Kelvin? Had she tested him too much and ultimately turned a blind eye to her true love? Jessie suffered greatly in the weeks that followed. She remained a hostage to the turbulent emotions that battered her from all sides, a storm that left her feeling drained and helpless. There were moments when she was tempted to reach out to Kelvin, to hear his voice again and try to make sense of everything that had happened. But then she would remember his lies and deceptions, and the lifeline of longing would dissolve, leaving behind only bitterness and regret. In the end, Kelvin's departure made Jessie realize the magnitude of the lies and betrayals that had colored their relationship. She wasn't sure if she would ever be able to trust anyone again. Days turned into weeks, and time continued to march on, even though Jessie felt stuck in the same painful place. Throughout it all, Roy remained steadfast by her side, offering quiet support and understanding. It was his unwavering presence that kept her from completely falling apart. Between his kind words and the daily rhythm of their lives, Jessie slowly began to find her footing again. She didn't know what the future held, but she was determined to face it with courage and resilience. She knew that she couldn't change the past, but she could control how she moved forward, and for now that was enough. As the weeks passed and Jessie began to adjust to the new reality of her life, she started to consider what lay ahead. The prospect of becoming a mother was both terrifying and exciting. She knew that it would be difficult, but she also felt a deep sense of responsibility towards the child she was carrying. She was reminded of her parents' love and sacrifice for her and Roy. The thought of being able to provide that same love and stability for her own child filled her with a sense of purpose. She vowed to do whatever it took to create a happy and stable life for her child, whatever the path might hold. Meanwhile, as Jessie grappled with her emotions and her uncertain future, Roy found himself consumed by a different set of questions and concerns. Each day, he became more and more convinced that there was something deeply wrong with the story Kelvin had told them. The more he thought about it, the more absurd it seemed. How could Jessie possibly be pregnant with Kelvin's child, given that she hadn't seen or spoken to him since their breakup? The whole situation seemed fraught with lies and deception, and Roy was determined to get to the bottom of it. In the quiet moments when he wasn't with Jessie, his mind raced with possibilities. He considered reaching out to Kelvin to demand the truth, but he quickly dismissed the idea. He knew that he needed real evidence if he wanted to uncover the truth. And so he devised a plan. It was a risky one, but Roy knew that he had to try. He needed to help Jessie regain control of her life and find the peace that had been stolen from her. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to do whatever it took. The opportunity to put his plan into action came sooner than he had expected. One afternoon, as Jessie was resting in her room, trying to overcome a severe headache, the doorbell rang. Roy glanced cautiously at Jessie's dozing form before hurrying to answer it. As he had hoped, it was Kelvin standing on the other side, someone entirely different from Jessie. Roy's blood turned cold at the sight of the man who had turned his sister's life upside down. For a moment, they stared at each other in silence.